March 4th, 1970. Britain woke up expecting nothing more than a normal Wednesday. Winter felt finished. Spring seemed close enough to touch. The worst cold was thought to be behind everyone. By lunchtime, that illusion was gone. Snow fell so heavily that entire regions disappeared beneath it. Trains bound for London arrived up to 8 hours late. Power lines collapsed, and hundreds of miners found themselves stranded deep underground when electricity failed. This was not a storm anyone had been warned about. The Met Office had completely missed it, and the country would not let them forget that. For 12 relentless hours, snow hammered large parts of England. In the East Midlands, conditions rivaled anything seen since the brutal winter of 1947. Near Northampton, drifts climbed close to 48 centimetres. In Kent, collapsing power lines plunged homes into darkness. Underground, 688 miners sat waiting in silence after lifts stopped working. This became known as the Forgotten Blizzard, a storm that arrived without warning and exposed just how vulnerable the nation was when forecasts failed. The winter of early 1970 had been unremarkable. Cold snaps came and went, with occasional light snow, but nothing out of the ordinary. By the time March arrived, people had mentally moved on. Daffodils were preparing to bloom. Coats were growing lighter. Homes were being aired out after months shut tight against the cold. Garden washing lines reappeared. Snow shovels were debated, then pushed to the back of sheds. Spring cleaning had begun. Then the atmosphere shifted quietly, dangerously. On March 2nd, bitter northerly winds slid down from Scandinavia, dragging Arctic air with them. A low-pressure system formed and tracked south. Almost no one noticed. The official forecast for March 4th mentioned only scattered snow showers. Light snowfall, perhaps some sleet, nothing serious. The kind of warning that changes footwear, not plans. It was disastrously wrong. Snow began falling in the early hours across southern England, the East Midlands and Wales. At first it looked harmless. A few flakes, nothing dramatic. Commuters carried on as usual. Children wondered if it might settle enough for snowballs at break time. By mid-morning, everything changed. The sky opened and snow poured down thick and fast, driven by cutting winds. Visibility collapsed. You couldn't see 10 feet ahead. Office workers stared out of windows as the outside world vanished. Shopkeepers stood helplessly in doorways, watching whiteout conditions swallow the streets. Within hours, roads disappeared. Rail services stalled. Britain, caught completely unprepared, ground to a halt. The East Midlands took the full force. Northamptonshire and Bedfordshire were buried. Snow lay over 40 centimetres deep in places, with drifts near Northampton pushing close to 48 centimetres, more than many winters delivered in total. And it didn't stop. For 12 solid hours, snow fell without pause. No breaks, no easing. Just relentless accumulation. Roads became impassable. Villages were cut off. Anyone outdoors quickly realized this was no ordinary snowfall. Farmers attempting to reach livestock turned back halfway across fields as snow climbed to their knees. Postmen abandoned rounds. Bicycles were left propped against walls, never collected. Milk bottles vanished under growing white mounds on doorsteps. Comparisons to 1947 spread quickly and not lightly. That winter had scarred the nation's memory. To see similar conditions return in March was shocking. Those who had lived through it stood at windows, shaking heads, muttering that they'd hoped never to witness such scenes again. Near Bedford, 36 centimetres of settled snow lay after 24 hours, not drifting, but solid coverage. The kind that reshapes landscapes and halts countries. Kent suffered badly. Power lines, weighed down by snow and battered by wind, began collapsing one after another. Electricity vanished. Lights went out. Heating stopped. Families lit candles, pulled on extra layers, and waited, unsure how long the outage would last. Far below ground, hundreds of miners were suddenly trapped. When power failed, lift systems stopped instantly. With no electricity, there was no way up. 688 men found themselves sitting in darkness, machinery silent around them. They weren't in immediate danger. Emergency lighting functioned, protocols kicked in, cigarettes were lit, Tea was shared. Cards were played by torchlight. Conversations drifted toward families above ground and whether anyone knew they were safe. The youngest tried not to show fear. The older miners told stories, keeping voices steady. This was the job. You endured. Rescue teams moved quickly, restoring enough power to restart the lifts. Every miner emerged safely into a world transformed, snow still falling, daylight reflecting off endless white. But the image lingered. Nearly 700 men trapped underground because a storm had not been forecast. On the rails, chaos ruled. Trains meant to reach London by early morning were still crawling through snow-choked Midlands routes 8 hours later. Passengers sat wrapped in coats, breath-fogging cold windows as snow piled higher outside. Heating struggled. Corridors filled with cigarette smoke as people paced restlessly. Business meetings were missed. Parents worried about children stranded at schools. Delays weren't counted in minutes. They stretched into hours. 8-hour delays became reality. Some services turned back entirely, unable to push forward. Platforms overflowed with frustration. Nobody had answers. Everyone wanted to know why no one had seen this coming. Across southern England, the same story played out. Buses abandoned routes. Cars vanished beneath snowdrifts. Farmers rescued stranded drivers with tractors. Delivery vans returned half full. Anyone attempting to walk quickly learned that March snow driven by Arctic winds cut deeper than winter flurries. Faces numbed. Cold seeped through every layer. Familiar streets became unrecognizable. Anger followed swiftly. When Parliament reconvened, the Met Office faced intense scrutiny. MPs demanded explanations. Businesses had lost thousands. Transport had collapsed. Constituents wrote furious letters. The defense was technical. Rapidly developing systems, unexpected moisture, snowfall heavier and longer than models predicted. None of it satisfied those who had frozen in trains, sat without power, or been cut off entirely. Timing made everything worse. People had relaxed. Emergency supplies weren't stocked. Coal reserves were low. When the storm hit without warning, preparation simply wasn't there. Elderly residents ran short on fuel. Parents couldn't reach shops. Entire villages lost communication as phone lines went down with the power. Snow finally eased on the evening of March 4th, 12 hours after it began. But the damage lingered. Temperatures plunged further, dropping as low as -15 degrees C in some areas. For over a week, snow remained unmoved. Roads stayed blocked. Villages stayed isolated. Britain, expecting drizzle and daffodils, found itself frozen beneath blue skies and bright sun. Children burst outdoors, sledging on tea trays and building snowmen. But behind the scenes, recovery was exhausting. Emergency services worked non-stop. Neighbors dug paths to vulnerable homes. Food was shared. In one Bedfordshire village, a shopkeeper opened despite empty shelves, selling remaining stock at normal prices. Slowly, temperatures rose, drifts shrank, roads reappeared. Life crept back. March 1970 left, a lesson Britain never forgot. Spring offers no guarantees. Forecasts can fail. And just 12 hours of unexpected snow can bring half a nation to its knees. If you lived through that day, share your story below. Were you stranded? Trapped on a train? Hit subscribe to keep these moments of British history alive.